Two weeks later, Rarity stepped back from the final mirror she had hung and took a slow turn to survey the room. An exhausted but broad grin overtook her face. For the first time, she had managed to lose herself and realized her vision. The showroom was a dream come true, reborn as wide, airy space, just begging to be filled with displays of clothing. Pale purple and pink rugs had been replaced with a thin, drearily patterned carpet. The brilliant oval mirrors with trickled the eye into thinking the shop was larger than it was, now surrounded large, richly painted desks. Opposite that, where Rarity stood, were the lines of the smaller mirrors above vanities with shelves ready to display the latest cosmetics samples. Spacious dressing rooms were partitioned with heavy, luxurious purple fabric adorned to the floor and the ceiling. She had quite simply outdone herself. And despite all that, what an obnoxious thought squirmed into her head like a determined termite through the wood grain. What if it's too gaudy? What if ponies want something more modern and minimalist? As if to answer her doubts, her gloom suddenly increased. Rarity shrank back in the moment of confusion. If the sun was going behind, coming in the clouds, and the room sank into darkness, the mirrors, which had done so much to amplify the natural light coming in, had turned gray and cold. All the colors suddenly seemed muted and lifeless, and Rarity's shoulders slumped. Despite the weeks of near constant work, the old hall was clinging to the dim shrouds of its old ways, like a disgruntled grandmother, and there was nothing she could do about it. Now, with all the wall hangings that were in place, the lamps were nestled snugly inside expertly crafted inches and fabric around them, backed by mirrors and surrounded by decorative metal. Even so, as long as she couldn't replace the fixtures with the mantles, she didn't dare light them anymore. She had taken precautions, but even the heavy fabric would catch fire if exposed to an open flame. I suppose I better get on with it, she thought dumbly. Winter was passing and she needed to fill the shop with clothes before winter wrap-up. That was her next task. She had a mountain of sketches and concepts, but the thought of stooping over her sewing table for another day made her neck ache. If only I could replace the lights, she thought, grinding her teeth. A loud knock made her front door rattle on its hinges, and Rarity yelped slightly in surprise. Stepping closer to the door, she could see the shadow of a misshapen head through the glass. Puzzled, she walked across the room, slid locked away, and gently pulled the door open. On the other side stood a tall unicorn with a sallow, yellow coat, with all the color of an old newspaper, and a stringy rust-colored mane that was mostly hidden under the cheap hat that looked like it had been intended to mimic the Manhattan fedora. He wore a brown suit that may have seemed to be tailored to stretch his shoulders at the most painful angle possible and tie exactly the shade of orange that Rarity thought to be banned from fashion altogether. "Miss Rarity," he said in a voice that Rarity could only comprehend to the sound of dry pasta snapping. "Speaking," she said slowly. "I'm afraid you have met me at a disadvantage." "A fine line, assistant treasurer of Canterlot's Historical Society," he replied, tapping a thin rectangular tag pinned to the lapel of his suit. "I'm here in regards for your inspection." "Inspection?" Rarity's voice was guarded. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "You have received a notice recently in regards of your application. You recall applying for one of the historic preservation grants in your relation to your..." He paused, frowning as he glanced around Rarity towards the interior in a way that she didn't like. "Development, don't you?" "That's right," Rarity said carefully. "But the grant was approved some time ago. I've already received the funds, and I haven't received any notices since." "Yes, well then," Fineline sniffed. "I happen to have a copy here with me." He levitated just a short memo, printed on the thin paper out of the briefcase at his side, and passed it to Rarity. It did indeed bear the seal of the Canterlot Historical Society and the signature of the society's president. Past keeper Rarity recognized both from the previous correspondences. It also detailed an invocation of clause even 7 of the conditions of her grant, which gave the society the rights to conduct inspections at their sole discretion to ensure the property was being maintained to their standards. As you'll notice, it is stated clearly that we take no responsibility for the failure of the small town's postal service to deliver our missives and as a timely manner. At any rate, we have the reason to believe that our funds were being misused. He glanced past Rarity again, as if trying to appraise something behind her. And what reasons are those? Rarity demanded, her muscles tightening. As a pony of interest, we've been doing a bit of checking in your records, he said, tapping his foot irritably against the case. It seems that in addition to applying for our grant, you've also applied for the Rich Historical Relevancy Grant. As it happens, we've had several dealings with Barnyard Bargains, Inc. in the past, and their interests have usually proven to be quite odds with our own. I'm sure you can understand our concerns, and I don't think I need to mention the extensive renovations of historic properties are in clear violation of the terms of our grant. It is the Historic Preservation Grant, you know. All of my plans to renovate this old town hall were clearly outlined in the proposal sent, Rarity countered. If the society has issues, I'd expect they would have been addressed prior to the approval. Be that as it may, Fineline pressed, if you fail to allow a comprehensive inspection of the property so that we may assure our guidelines are being adhered to, the society will have no choice but to revoke the grant. He stepped forward just a few inches, crowding Rarity as he looked down at her. She refused to budge. At your most immediate convenience. I don't care much for the way you've been addressing me, Rarity snapped, and I don't think much of your notice either. You expect to show up in downright suspicious circumstances and simply be invited to my home? You've made this home a protectorate of Canterlot Historical Society, Fineline sneered. We have as much interest to invest it as you do, and that gives us the rights. I have a mind to report you right to the local constabulary, Rarity retorted. By all means, he shrugged. Invite as many of your local yokes as you wish. I will still conduct this inspection, and I would advise you to stop trying to weasel your way out of it. Weasel? Rarity sputtered. You know what? Fine. Look around you want. And as soon as you're done, I'm informing the constabulary about the minute of this visit. So you had better find yourself in the next train in Canterlot. At the moment you are exhausted instructive curiosity, and you and your society can expect a very thorough complaint for this incident. We'll see, he said, practically pushing past her as she let him in, regardless to the decorated showroom with an upturned nose and lips pressed into a thin, deprecating line. Looking down, he pushed and tugged at the new carpet with the hoof, as if he were trying to rip it. Is this new? Yes, Rarity admitted angrily, as I outlined in my proposal. And how have you secured these curtains? We've all wall anchors and... So you've damaged the original walls with the hardware larger than small nails. No more than... And what about the fixtures? Your proposal states they're original. Fineline moved over to the other metal brackets in the wall. Have you modified any of them? No, the shops have been sold out of the stock I need, Rarity said. Fineline seemed unimpressed. You'll have to discontinue their use. They're a clear safety hazard to this property. I don't need you to tell me that, Rarity snapped, as she felt her chest swell with anger, and she was barely suppressing an urge to punch him. And modifying them is out of the question, he said, turning away and raking his eyes over to the desk, and he searched for something to criticize. As one of the few things you've left undamaged so far, it's the utmost importance they would be left alone. Excuse me? Rarity all but yelled at him. And what exactly do you expect me to do? For light. That's none of our concern. All that matters to us is that historical properties remain enclosed to the condition of their relevant periods as possible, unspoiled by, shall we say, the kind of short-sighted business owners Filthy Rich tends to indulge. Now, just for a moment, Rarity said, stomping her hoof, your society has several preservations that allow for modifications and updating when matters safety are involved, and we're in the building that had been modified in the past. If anything, I'm bringing it closer to its original state. Your proposal does not provide any proof of that, Fineline said dismissively, walking into the kitchen. In order just to justify all this, you'll need to procedure evidence of how the building has been altered in the past. As it is, you will appear you simply have your way with the place, and the society simply will not stand for it. Now let's see if the upstairs has suffered as badly as everything else I've seen. It only got worse after that. After condemning everything she had done to the upstairs rooms, Fineline had left her with an already made-up notice that fully revoked her entire grant. When she protested a significant amount that had already been spent startup's costs, he flatly replied that if she couldn't repay the society's money, the courts would soon be more capable of setting the account, probably, he added, by an auctioning off her assets. Rarity was left in her own showroom, trembling with helpless rage. Her mind was spinning, unable to settle on the idea long enough to analyze it. This would ruin her. The only stipulation that offered any sort of hope was that she was allowed 1 week's time to either gather the necessary funds to repay the society, and impossibly too absurd, so to make her laugh, cry, scream at the same time, or to appeal their decision and provide the evidence that all the changes she made had justified and necessary. As she looked around the room, shrouded in gloom that smoldered in the colors of her new design, the necessity of what she was doing seemed laughably obvious. What she didn't know was how to convince a society of stuck-up Cantrellonians, obsessed with keeping every doornail unchanged of that. You want evidence? She spat in a trembling voice. Oh, I'll give you evidence. I'll give you as much evidence as you choke on it, you moldering bureaucrats. With that, she yanked a coat on, boots, and not caring whatever they matched practically well or not, and slammed the door so hard on her way out that she left a wandering, slanted crack on the lower left of the door's corner of the window pane. Go on, disapprove of that too, Rarity thought, as she set out on the town with a firm trot, paying little attention to everything around her until a familiar voice broke through the reverie. Hey there, Rarity! Rarity let out an audible groan before she could stop herself. Out of all the ponies she could have run into, this was the last one she wanted to deal with right now. Swapping her exasperated expression for one she hoped would let pass for neutral, she turned and faced Pinkie Pie as she bounced up to her. I'm glad I caught up to you, she said. I just went over to your shop to see you, but you weren't home. And I thought, oh no, if she's not home, I can't give her the letter. And if I don't do it now, I'll probably forget again. But then on my way back, I saw you, and I thought, gah, that must be Rarity. I could totally give it to her before so... Pinkie, Rarity broke flatly. The effervescent voice was threatening to bring the another headache on. What do you have to tell me? Oh, right, here you go, Pinkie said, totally unperturbed. She reached up and pulled a battered envelope out off of her mane, which then she passed it to Rarity with a smile. Minnie's office got this a little while back by mistake. I think the post office forgot there was someone living in the old gallery now, which isn't that surprising, since up until recently everything related has either been sent to Town Hall or Minnie's office. Rarity didn't even hear the rest of what Pinkie was prattling about. The envelope was clearly from the Canterlot Historical Society. Just a quick glance and confirmed her suspicion that it was indeed twin to one fine line that had presented her with that morning, detailing to no certainty terms she would expect from the inspection in 3 weeks' time. No need to report that odious prig, I suppose, she thought, grinding her teeth. Pinkie was still jabbering in the background, but after Rarity fixed her with a withering glare for a few moments, even when she seemed to become aware of something was wrong. Rarity, she asked, her smile flickering a bit. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to take so long to get to that you. It's just that Minnie's been so busy with all the homes she sold recently and... Do you have any idea how important this was? Rarity growled. All the rage Fine Line had left behind was raising up again, and just begging for an outlet. Really, really important? Really, really, really important. Rarity spat. Did you know I was surprised with an unpleasant visit from the Canterlot Historical Society this morning? Well, thanks to you, I have absolutely no time to prepare for it. And do you want to know something else here? Rarity threw the letter down and crushed it into the mud with her boot. Because of it, I might just lose a huge chunk of my funding, and everything I've worked for will be completely destroyed. I didn't think of that. I've absolutely no doubt, Rarity snapped, raising her voice and stamping on the letter again. A splash of mud struck Pinky as she backed away in a step. In the entire weeks of sorting files and playing in bakeries, you didn't even once think that it was important for you to get some onto one of your clients, for Celestia's sake. A timely manner. Was it so hard just to walk by and stick an envelope through a slot? Pinky opened her mouth to say something, but snapped it shut when Rarity pointed a threatening hoof at her. I don't know where your supposedly legendary organizational skills were, but in the future, I hope you show a little more discretion before you run into another client's life to the ground. Rarity spun, taking a few deliberately firm steps before adding, and you could be sure Mortgage will hear about this. She didn't bother to look back at Pinky as she strode away. When she had gone for a short distance, she let out a long, pained sigh. She had hoped that she might feel at least better after taking some anger out, but instead she only felt ill. At least it was justified. Then she noticed a little quieter in the market than normal. She turned away to see a number of ponies staring down at her. Applejack among them, the farm pony, stood by her hand, watching Rarity with a dark-faced concerned frown. What does she know? Rarity thought, ignoring the stares and walking determinedly onward. The marketplace was soon left behind, replaced with the winding roads and countless thatched cottages of that northern side of town. Ahead of her, a snow-laden branches of the library tree loomed up against the end of the road. For what must have been the 100th time, Rarity wondered idly into who fashioned the huge oak tree into living texturosity, and what their involvement with Ponyville had been. That would have to remain a mystery, however. The tree's history was not the one she was interested in. As the red arched door opened before her, a hoof-ridden open sign whacked slightly against a trio of small bells jangled over her head. Behind a massive desk with neat ordered stacks of paper weighing down, an elderly Pegasus looked up and smiled quickly as Rarity closed the door behind her. She had a coat with the color of the early spring grass and an unruly mass of white mane clinging to her head. Rarity thought it might have been just the tension instilled in her throughout the day, but she thought that something guarded in the librarian's expression that it had never been during the previous visits. Hello, Rarity. Her voice was pleasant and soft, and the finest hint of the country accent, aged by the faintest crackle at that. Ironically, that had always reminded Rarity of the stiff pages in the old book. She stood up and her left ear fell forward limply as she trotted back around the desk. What brings you here this fine winter day? Hello, Miss Dog-Ear, Rarity answered. Like every pony in Ponyville, Rarity never felt the right addressing the librarian casually by Miss Dog-Ear was one of the eternally elderly figures that would always be addressed formally, no matter how old any pony got. Rarity smiled wearily as she pulled off her boots by the door, and the librarian's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Everything all right, Rarity? She asked. Rarity paused in hanging up her coat, then let her shoulders fall and sigh. I wish I could say this was to tell the truth. I had a rather wretched day. Well, I'm pretty sure sorry to hear that, Dog-Ear replied, smiling sympathetically. Can I get you anything? If you're here for the new catalogs, I'm afraid they haven't come in yet. Actually, I need a different kind of research today. Did Mother mention that I moved to the old town hall? Yes, she did, Dog-Ear said slowly. putting a hoof and twitching her ear back up. Of course I guessed that you were planning on setting up shop somewhere. Didn't think it would be there, though. Hey, I remember when that place was getting built. One of the first buildings in Ponyville, and by far the biggest at the time. Things changed, I suppose. A little too much for some ponies' liking, Rarity said, and Dog-Ear turned sharply back at her. How do you mean? I mean, I have found myself on the wrong side of Canterlot Historical Society, Rarity explained. I was hoping I could find enough information about the history of the old-time town hall to prove that I'm not doing any real damage by renovating it. Do you have anything that can help? Dog-Ear seemed to relax a little as she fell into her element. Well, I don't know much about it will help, but I do know I got some old articles that reference the town hall. Remember a fair bit myself too, well before I got old. She laughed. Wonderful, Rarity said, giggling a little to herself. The microshave machine is downstairs, yes? That's right. Just hang on a sec. Why don't you let me go down and sort things out for you first? A bit of mess down there, you know? It doesn't seem much to use, and I can see some sort of way you're looking for faster than you can. Why don't you fix yourself up some hot cocoa and follow me down when you're ready? She gestured to a little table that was always stocked with free refreshments for the library patrons. A mirror in a dark red flame hung above it, and Rarity moved to the table just in time to see the reflection of Miss Dog-Ear glance back at her before disappearing down into the library's basement. Rarity scrutinized the mirror for a minute longer, an odd sense of deja vu passing over her before she shook it off and focused on its streaming beverages and prop pots in front of her. It had been courageous, but Miss Dog-Ear had always put the comfort in her patrons above the security of her books. She had probably had to replace more text than the average librarian, but she was usually laughed when she asked about it. Books are irreplaceable, but the folks who come here aren't, she always said. If some uptight little filly wants to come in here and guard the books, like they're Celestia's own foals, well, she's welcome to it, and once I'm cold and feeding grass. Rarity smiled as she inhaled the bittersweet fragrance rising from the now warmed-up cup, and turned her head down to the basement. She descended to the dim steps as she noticed the brightly, gently hissing mantle lamps that illuminated the stairs with a pang of envy. When she reached the ground floor, she found the librarian turning to the hot, painfully bright lime lamp beneath the microfiche reader. It was an ugly old box with a huge array of lenses leading to an oval window, now glowing brightly with light. Beside it were several folders containing bits of the dark film, all of which were metallishly labeled and dated. There you go, Rarity, Dog-Ear said, twitching her head and bringing her ear back to position. Then she placed up one of the packets, leaving the rest on the table. Those are from the old town hall when it was first being built. They first built the one 11 years later, so you might want to check out around then as well. Perfect, Rarity said, setting her cocoa down. Do you remember when it was last used for the years after? Oh, this and that? She repeated slowly. Several businesses came and went, but the place had gotten pretty run down by then. Ponies were more interested in the northern part of town in those days. Ponyville was booming and everyone wanted to grow away from the borders of the Everfree as fast as it could. Can't really blame them here. Her ear flopped over again, but she ignored it and resumed her walk upstairs. I suppose not. Oh, by the way, I was talking about the hall to the pony who runs the apple stand in town, Rarity continued. Applejack? That's her. She mentioned it used to be an art gallery. Do you remember anything about it? Miss Dog-Ear's wings fluttered as she startled. She had dropped the packet that she was carrying. She stooped and grumbled to herself as she scooped it back up and tucked it out of her sight beneath the wing. Yes, I remember, she finally said. Used to be owned by a young painter named, well, I don't think I recall. She looked down, examining the step in front of her. I do know she was the last pony to try and make something of the town. It was back in 959, I think. What happened then? Rarity asked, looking down at the librarian curiously. It didn't do well. Not much of a surprise. Small town like this. She closed up shop a few years later. No one was interested in that place after that. She sniffed as she went in annoyance, and then looked back down at Rarity. You be careful with that coca. These films aren't as easy to replace as books. Don't worry, ma'am, Dog-Ear nodded, and Rarity left for work. 3 hours later, Rarity had an veritable gold mine in those notes that she had piled next to the microchip reader. No fewer than 4 businesses had come and gone in time since the hall had been built. Each of them had altered the property extensively. None had done so more than a restaurant that hadn't even opened in the end, but had managed to strip down the entire exterior to its current bleak state before abandoning the project. Then followed a few years in which sat empty, and Rarity had skipped ahead to a relevant article from 959. It appeared to be the last chapter of the hall's history before her own began and be in the present. Incoming artist causes excitement. Miss Tola Rula, a landscape artist of some apparent renown in Equestria, has announced that she'll be opening a studio in Ponyville's Old Town Hall. Many residents have expressed their own enthusiasm for the idea, and many will tell you that it's a sign that our town is continuing to grow at a place where ponies are proud to call home. What for a while well-known artists who established themselves here is indicative as Ponyville's culture and industry continue to shine. Our illustration's mayor have said the Express in an inclusive interview. We are looking forward to having Ms. Rolla as a valued member and contributor to our great community, and the board approved her proposal and purchase unanimously. Yet despite all the fuss, not much is known about the artist herself. Although in Aurora some mystery is to be expected of any great artist, Ms. Rolla did consent to speak with the Express briefly as she surveyed her own new home at last Thursday afternoon. I recently lost my father, may he rest in peace, and the family home was just too big and gloomy to keep myself. I'm the only one left in our once large family, you see, so I've taken all what was left of me, and I'm hoping for a bright, clean start here in Ponyville. We are here to express the confidence that we speak for every pony, conveying our condolences, as well as eagerness to welcome her to our town. Rarity scanned back to the top of the page, where an ancient photograph showed Tula Rula in the front of what would become her gallery. The old building was a sinister silhouette in the background. The walls had darkened total blackness that indicates of the old camera. Tula herself had smiled at the camera on the foreground, and although the colors were impossible to discern the old picture, Rarity felt her suspicions were unequivocally confirmed. This was the pink earth pony whose portrait lay in the basement, and whose presumably had painted the rest of the disturbing pictures forgotten down there. If that's the kind of thing she painted, then it's no wonder she didn't do so well around here. Well-known landscaper painter, indeed, Rarity said to herself. She continued searching, but found no other mention of Tula Rula. The only references to the gallery appeared more than 10 years later in advertisements for general auctions. They listed items such as antique dressers, mirrors, tables, and many other pieces of antique furniture up for sale and maintained property in custody of the city. Rarity supposed the artist's notary must have faded after the initial fuss, and that she had eventually closed the gallery and moved on without so much as a farewell note, leaving Ponyville without high culture once again. Regardless, Rarity had what she needed. She extinguished by the lamps before gathering her notes and heading upstairs. Find what you're looking for? Dog-Ear asked, looking up from her desk. I think so, Rarity said with a tired smile. Thank you so much, Miss Dog-Ear. You really don't know how much this could mean to me. Well, I hope everything turns out all right for you. She walked with Rarity towards the door. And I can't wait to see what you can do with this place. Celestia knows you deserved it to somewhat happier times. I certainly hope so. By the way, don't you suppose happen to remember what became of the artist after she left Ponyville? Just that the town hall happened to have an entire basement full of what I assumed were her paintings, and well, I'd just soon be rid of them. There was no mistaking in the way Miss Dog-Ear froze this time, her hoof handled on the door. She looked at the Rarity with a shocked expression, and she had gone slightly pale. Those things are still there? Well, yes, it happens, Rarity said, confused by the reaction. There's a photo of the Express that took when the artist arrived in Ponyville, and there's a self-portrait of her down in the other works. I thought those would be auctioned off. They sold everything else, Dog-Ear muttered, almost as to herself was more than Rarity. She glanced back into the room and her gaze lingering on the mirrors above the beverage table for a split second longer than anywhere else. Then she looked back at Rarity and smiled. And if you've seen those paintings, I doubt I'll need to tell you and ask why they didn't sell well here. Honestly, if I were you, I'd just toss them. I don't think you'll get much of them for them anywhere. Certainly not enough to be worth the trouble. Oh, I couldn't just do that, Rarity gasped, donning her coat and boots. They're hardly to my taste, certainly, but I couldn't just throw somebody's art in the trash. She'd be older than I am, if she's still around here somewhere, Dog-Ear said, a slight edge of exasperation in her voice as she opened the door. If Tula cared about them, she would have come back for them. Just do yourself a favor and trash them. Somewhere behind them, a sharp snap rang out of the library as if something fallen had broken somewhere. Although the sound was brisk, isolated, and unaccompanied by sound scattering shards, Rarity glanced back, unable to see what the sound had come from. What was that? I'm sure it was nothing, Miss Dog-Ear said, but her voice had turned and clipped so hard that she looked behind herself. Left a glass in the wrong place, I expect. Now I think you should go, Rarity. Miss Dog-Ear, is something wrong? Rarity asked, frowning as she was ushered out the door. Something Miss Dog-Ear had said was bothering her, but she just couldn't pin down on it. Nothing. Just a little more tired than I thought, and you've got work to do. Come back soon. And with that, the door was shut. Rarity just stood there for a moment, puzzled and a little alarmed by the librarian's sudden change in demeanor. Hesitantly, she turned around and started walking south towards home. Looking back, she saw Miss Dog-Ear through the window. She was sitting at her desk once more and reading through something. As Rarity turned away, however, she realized what had been bothering her. Miss Dog-Ear had mentioned Tularula's name, and though she had said earlier that she didn't remember. That's odd, Rarity thought. I guess she must have remembered. Putting the outrageous behavior down to an old mare's idiosyncrasies, Rarity resumed her walk, and started thinking about how she would phrase scavenging up to appeal Canterlot historical history. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.